to the Story Box by Creative Spaces. My name is Jess and I am your storyteller today. And today, get your marmalade sandwiches ready because we're reading Paddington by Michael Bond and illustrated by R.W. Alley. Mr. and Mrs. Brown first met Paddington on a railway platform. In fact, that was how he came to have such an unusual name for a bear, because Paddington was the name of the station. Do you know where Paddington Station is? London, the big smoke, yeah. The Browns were waiting to meet their daughter Judy when Mr. Brown noticed something small and furry near the left luggage office. "It looks like a bear," he said. "A bear?" repeated Mrs. Brown. "On Paddington Station? Don't be silly, Henry, there can't be." "If I had a beautiful bear that looked like Paddington, I wouldn't let him out of my sight." But Mr. Brown was right. It was sitting on an old leather suitcase marked "Wanted on Voyage." And as they drew near, it stood up and politely raised its hat. "Good afternoon," it said. "May I help you?" "Well, it's very kind of you," said Mr. Brown, "but as a matter of fact, we were wondering if we could help you." "You're a very small bear," said Mrs. Brown. "Where are you from?" The bear looked around carefully before replying. You look around like this. See who's listening, who's watching. "Darkest Peru. I'm not really supposed to be here at all. I'm a stowaway." Wow. What's a stowaway? Do you know what that word means? Stow. To hide something. Oh, wait. He's a stowaway. He's hidden on a ship, I think. "You don't mean to say you've come all the way from South America on your own?" exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "Whatever did you do for food?" We know, don't we? Unlocking the suitcase, the bear took out an almost empty glass jar. "I ate marmalade," it said. "Bears like marmalade." Have you ever had marmalade? It's really sweet, sticky and gooey like jam but made out of oranges. Mrs. Brown looked at the label around the bear's neck and it said quite simply, "Please look after this bear. A thank you." Oh, look, that's so sweet, that lovely little tag that someone's made. "Oh, Henry," she cried, "we can't leave him here all by himself. There's no knowing what might happen to him. Can't he come and live with us?" "Stay with us?" repeated Mr. Brown, nervously. What do you think? Would you have a bear from deepest, darkest Peru come and stay in your house with you? A bear's house trained? He looked down at the bear. Would you like that? That is," he asked hastily, "if you have nothing else planned." "Oh, yes," replied the bear. "I would like that very much. I've nowhere to go and everyone seems in such a hurry." Well, yes, I bet they do at Paddington Station. "That settles it," said Mrs. Brown. "Now you must be thirsty after your journey. Mr. Brown can get you some tea whilst I go and meet our daughter Judy." "But Mary," said Mr. Brown, "we don't even know its name." Mrs. Brown thought for a moment. "I know," she said. "We'll call him Paddington, after the station." Paddington. The bear tested it several times to make sure. Paddington. Paddington. Oh yes, it sounds very important. Mr. Brown tried it out next. "Follow me, Paddington, and I'll take you to the snack bar." I would love to go to a snack bar. If you could have any snack right now, what would you have? I'd probably have peanuts, pistachio nuts, or cashew nuts. Wonder if Paddington likes nuts too. Mr. Brown was as good as his word. Paddington had never seen so many snacks on one tray, and he didn't know which one to try first. He was so hungry and so thirsty that he climbed up onto the table to get a better look. Mr. Brown turned away, pretending he had tea with a bear on Paddington Station every day of his life, like it was completely normal. "Henry," cried Mrs. Brown when she arrived with Judy, "what are you doing to that poor bear?" Paddington jumped up to raise his hat, and in haste he trod on a strawberry tart, skidded on the cream, and fell over backwards with his cup of tea. Look, it's gone all over him. Poor Paddington. "I think we'd better go before anything else happens," said Mr. Brown. Judy took hold of Paddington's paw. "Come along," she said. "We'll take you home and you can meet Mrs. Bird and my brother, Jonathan." Judy looks really excited to have Paddington come and live with them, doesn't she? Mr. Brown led the way to a waiting taxi. "Number 32 Windsor Gardens, please," he said. And the driver just stared at Paddington like this. Can you stare? Just like this? Like, imagine if you saw a talking bear trying to get into a taxi. "Bears is extra," he said. "Sticky bears is twice as much. And make sure none of it comes off of my interior. It was clean when I set out this morning." Oh, look at that. They've got to pay extra just because he's a bear and a very sticky bear. The sun was shining as they drove out of the station, and there were cars and big red buses everywhere. Paddington waved to some people waiting at a bus stop, and several of them waved back. It was all very friendly. I always wave if I see someone on the bus. I love when people wave to me and wave back. Paddington tapped the taxi driver on his shoulder. "It isn't a bit like deepest, darkest Peru," he announced. And the man jumped at the sound of Paddington's voice. "Cream," he said bitterly. "Cream and jam all over me coat." He slid the little window down behind him shut. "Oh dear, Henry," murmured Mrs. Brown. "I wonder if we're doing the right thing." Oh, he's being mean to Paddington, but Paddington's just excited. He's never been in a taxi before. He's never seen London. Fortunately, before anyone had time to answer, they arrived at Windsor Gardens and Judy helped Paddington onto the pavement. That's very nice of Judy. "Now you're going to meet Mrs. Bird," she said. "She looks after us. She's a bit fierce at times, but she doesn't really mean it, and I'm sure you'll really like her." Paddington felt his knees begin to wobble. "I'm sure I shall if you say so," he said. "The thing is, will she like me?" What do you think? Look at her face. She's thinking, who on earth has brought a bear back to our house? And she's going to have to help look after him and train him, isn't she? "Goodness gracious," exclaimed Mrs. Bird. "What have you got there?" "It's not a what," said Judy. "It's a bear called Paddington, and he's coming to stay with us." "A bear?" said Mrs. Bird, as Paddington raised his hat. "Well, he has good manners, I'll say that for him." "I'm afraid I did step on a jam tart by mistake," said Paddington. "I can see that," said Mrs. Bird. "You'd better have a bath before you're very much older. Judy can turn it on for you. I dare say you'll be wanting some marmalade too." "I think she likes you," said Judy. "You think she does?" Paddington had never been in a bathroom before, and while the water was running, he made himself at home. First of all, he tried writing his new name in the steam on the mirror. Wow, he must be good at spelling if he knows how to write Paddington. Then he used Mr. Brown's shaving foam to draw a map of Peru on the floor. It wasn't until a drip landed on his head that he remembered what he was supposed to be doing. What is he supposed to be doing? Yeah, getting clean, getting in the bath and scrubbing himself clean. He soon discovered that getting into a bath is one thing, but it's quite another matter getting out again, especially if it's full of soapy water. Uh-oh, he's slipping all over the place. Paddington tried calling out, "Help!" At first in a quiet voice so as not to disturb anyone, then very loudly, "Help! "Help!" And when that didn't work, he started bailing the water out with his hat. But the hat had several holes in it, and his map of Peru soon turned into a sea of foam. Uh-oh! Suddenly, Jonathan and Judy burst into the bathroom and lifted a dripping Paddington onto the floor. "Thank goodness you're all right," said Judy. "We heard you calling out." "Fancy making such a mess," said Jonathan, admiringly. "You should have pulled the plug out." "Oh," said Paddington. "I never thought of that." "Well, don't worry, Paddington. You wouldn't have. If you've never had a bath before, you wouldn't know, would you?" When Paddington came downstairs, he looked so clean, no one could possibly be cross with him. His fur was all soft and silky, his nose gleamed, and his paws had lost all traces of the jam and the cream, and probably marmalade underneath his claws. The Browns made room for him in a small armchair. Maybe like this one, what do you think? Cosy. And Mrs. Bird brought him a pot of tea and a plate of hot buttered toast and, you've guessed it, marmalade. Whoa, how much marmalade does this bear eat? "Now," said Mrs. Brown, "you must tell us all about yourself. I'm sure you must have had lots of adventures." "I have," said Paddington earnestly. "Things are always happening to me. I'm that sort of a bear." He settled back into the armchair. "I was brought up by my Aunt Lucy in deepest, darkest Peru," he said. "But she had to go into a home for retired bears in Lima." He closed his eyes thoughtfully. Can you all do that? Close your eyes thoughtfully. And a hush fell over the room as everyone waited expectantly. Look at everybody, listening very, very attentively to the bear. After a while, when nothing happened, they began to get restless. Mr. Brown tried coughing. Then he reached across and poked Paddington. "Well, I never," he said. "I do believe he's fast asleep." "After all that's happened to him," said Mrs. Brown, "is it any wonder?" And look at that, there's Paddington, with his hat by the side of him and his half-eaten marmalade on toast, and he's fallen asleep in the cosy armchair, probably dreaming about all of those amazing adventures that he's been on, and adventures that he's yet to go on. What sort of adventures would you like to go on? Have a think about that. And when you're having a little sleep tonight, maybe you can go there in your dreams. Well, thank you all for listening, everybody. We'll see you all next time for the Story Box. Goodbye.